Hi Janesville, welcome to Park Place Views, brought to you by the City of Janesville and JATVMedia Services. I'm your host, Molly Nolte, and I'm the Management Information Specialist in the City Manager's Office. This monthly program aims to keep Janesville residents informed by highlighting the people, places, events, and partners in the City of Janesville. On last month's episode, I spoke with City Manager Mark Freitag about the city's strategic plan and accomplishments during the last 5 years. If you're interested in viewing past episodes of Park Place Views, they're available to watch on the city's website or JATV's YouTube channel. Today, City Manager Mark Freitag is joining us again, along with Finance Director Max Gagin, to learn about the city's 2019 budget, as well as some legislative information going into the new year. Mark has served as Janesville City Manager since December 2013. He's a veteran of the United States Army, where he served as a colonel towards the end of his 25-year military career. Max first began working for the City of Janesville in 2009 as a management intern in the City Manager's Office. He then spent 2.5 years working as a budget and management analyst for Broward County, Florida. In 2013, Max rejoined the city team in Janesville as a management analyst and moved to assistant to the city manager in September 2014. In December 2017, Max was promoted to Finance Director. Welcome back, Mark and Max, and thanks for being here today.
Great to be here.
Great to be here.
Great. Well, Mark, the city's 2019 budget was adopted by the City Council in November, but it is quite a long process before it's presented to the Council in this final form. Could you share with us an overview of the budget process?
Yeah, so our budget process is about 4 months in duration. Max and his team do some preliminary work, during the month of July. I won't count that towards the 4 months, but we start out in the month of August, very beginning, with a sit down or a workshop with our city council members to try and develop the budget parameters. One, to kind of give them, this is what we think our reality is as far as money we have to make up, or programs that we might want to need to consider changing, altering, or potentially getting rid of. And then we give them that macro projection, if you will, and then get them to set some budget parameters that help us to work through the budget process. So we kind of have our left and right boundaries, if you will. And so that goes on at the very beginning of August. Throughout the month of August, our department and division heads, then develop their own department division budgets. And then during the month of September, they come in and talk to me. Max is obviously there, and we review those particular department division or some of the programmatic budgets across the city. And so we have those discussions in September. Late September, when all is said and done, we kind of do a reconciliation meeting to make sure, that we've met the council's budget parameters. We take a couple days to get the budget book put together, and it's several hundred pages, if you will, of stuff. And then we present that to the council mid-October. And so they have a few days to look through that before we do a series of budget study sessions in mid to late October. We start out with the budget presentation, and then they really come back, and it's an opportunity for them to ask questions, and then to propose any amendments to the budget that they would like to do. But the bottom line is by the end of October, we really want to have what we would call then the council's draft budget, or what they're proposing to the public. And so we put that out there, and then invite the public to come in the first meeting in November to participate in a public hearing about the budget. And that's their opportunity, the citizenry, the residents of the city of Janesville, to talk about things that they like, things that they don't like, areas that they wish we had more priorities or emphasis on. And then the council has an opportunity to, essentially digest that, make any changes or amendments finally. And then the second meeting in November is when the council will adopt the budget. And so then Max and our clerk treasurer, Dave Godek, the two of them sit down and figure out all those fine numbers associated with the tax rate, et cetera. And then we bring the council back in typically late November, early December, depending, just to set that tax rate. And it's typically a 5-minute meeting so that they can send out the tax bills for the 2019 year. And so that's the process, soup to nuts. It's just, it's about a 4-month process. I think we've got some opportunities maybe to condense it a little bit. We've talked about that with the council, but we'll see where we go next year. But so far it's been a pretty good and effective 4-month process.
So when that process began back in August, were there any challenges that the city faced as we began developing this year's library and city budget?
Yeah, surprisingly this year, no. Traditionally, at least since I've been here, we always seem to start out the budget year with a significant shortfall that we have to make up, which means, adjusting programs or coming up with creative ways to generate revenue, whatever the case may be. And so in this year, we started out the budget cycle, that first meeting in August, and we were really looking at about, what were we at? About a $70,000 shortfall, which in the city's budget history, if you will, not really a big amount to overcome. And so as we worked through the process, we were able to cover that $70,000 shortfall. And so this year, as I described it to the council, was really a maintenance budget, and that is, we took the 2018 budget, we, made some slight adjustments to it, and in 2019, you're pretty much going to get everything that you had in 2018, by and large across the city. And so if you like what happened in 2018, you're going to see more of the same in 2019.
Good. Well, Max, in years past, we've talked about the city being in a disadvantaged position as we enter the budget process. Was the situation similar for the 2019 budget, and why?
No, the city was actually in a much better financial position heading into our 2019 budget compared to most years, and that has to do with the strong economy, both statewide as well as locally, because the state does have restrictions on the types of revenues you can generate, and some of those are really dependent on economic factors. So, for example, the city can only increase its operating property tax levy by the amount of net new construction. So essentially new buildings built in the community, and that factor was very good for this year at 1.29%. And then we've also seen some additional revenue from things like interest earnings. So as interest rates increase, we're realizing additional revenue there. So we're very fortunate in that for 2019, we had additional revenue growth that was able to cover the costs of programs and services. But I will say, I would consider our 2019 budget atypical. What we see for most years is that 82% of our general fund budget is made up of either property taxes or state shared revenue, both of which are restricted by the state. So once we start seeing some of that construction activity slow down, the amount of property taxes we can levy for operating expenditures will go down in correlation, as well as we'll start seeing other indicators like interest earnings go down. So 2019 was a very good year for us, but we know that it doesn't happen like that every year.
So you've already mentioned state shared revenue. Let's talk a little bit more about that. What is the city's position on this ongoing issue?
Sure. So the city's position is that we receive an inequitable amount of state shared revenue. So we've been looking at this issue for the past 5 years, and what we find is that when the city is compared to our 15 peer communities in Wisconsin, we receive the third lowest of those. And that may not be a problem in and of itself, because there are communities that have higher property tax levies and are able to make up for shortfalls in shared revenue through their property tax levy. So just because you have low shared revenue doesn't necessarily mean you have financial problems or fiscal challenges in your community, because you have the property taxes to offset it. But when we look at both of those funding sources together, and as I mentioned, that's 82% of our general fund revenue, Janesville has the lowest of our 15 peers, and by quite a bit of a significant amount. So when we look at what our average peer community receives in shared revenue, it's about $180 per person. Janesville receives $82. Wow. So it's almost a $100 difference. And one of the things we do is we estimate if we had the same amount of shared revenue as our average community in Wisconsin, the city would receive an additional $6.2 million a year.
That's a lot of money. So Mark, are there any other unique revenue challenges imposed on the city of Janesville? How do levy limits negatively impact the city and the Janesville community at large?
Yeah. So as Max just talked about state shared revenue and the anomaly that Janesville finds itself in, one of the things that frankly affects the entire state, and as we look at this, we find ourselves very frustrated with it, and that is that one of the restrictions on raising your tax levy is, essentially set to net new construction. So the maximum that you can raise your levy from year to year is by that value of net new construction. So 1.23%, you said? And so, that means, okay, I can raise my tax levy by 1.23%. The problem set is that inflation, over the past several years has, outpaced net new construction. And so, inflation comes in higher than that net new construction amount. And so all that hard work to bring new businesses and to bring new jobs and new value to your community gets eaten away every year by inflation. And so it's a losing battle if you think about it, in terms of this is how much net new construction I can raise my tax levy by, this is the cost of providing those same services, and it gets eaten up. And so you're just never going to get anywhere. And so it's frustrating from an economic development standpoint that, we're out there working in the development community to bring jobs and to build new facilities in the city of Janesville. No matter how hard we work, it continues to get eaten by inflation. And then, oh, by the way, what's the cumulative effect of that delta, if you will, that difference over time, and you look at the charts and you're just never going to see it cross or intersect. And so it's a tough position for the city to be in. I would tell you that we've talked to our state legislators, we've talked to the governor, we've talked to the League of Wisconsin Municipalities about, let's propose a change, and that is that, you can raise your levy limit by inflation plus net new construction maximum. So we're not penalizing cities for doing all that hard work to bring jobs and development to not only Janesville or the community, but to the state as a whole.
Right.
Why are we getting penalized for all that hard work? And so what we would propose is if this is inflation and net new construction is that your overall value that you could raise the tax levy by is the combination of those two. It's not getting a lot of traction, unfortunately. We'll see with the new administration and the new legislature whether anything changes, but it's again, like shared revenue, it's one of those things that is causing us to have challenges meeting the needs and the demands of the community from year to year.
So speaking of the legislature, the city develops a legislative agenda at both the state and federal levels every year, and we've done so for the last 5 years. Do you feel our state elected leaders understand our concerns, and do you think that there's been any changes over the last 5 years?
Yeah. So first of all, whether they get it, and I think the answer is yes, they do. But those are hard decisions to make. When you come into office as an elected member. And so the message that we've gotten back as we've talked to legislators about shared revenue is that, if we fix shared revenue, Janesville may see, goodness happen, but people who, are getting high shared revenue and maybe should be getting something medium or middle of the road, are going to lose some shared revenue.
Right.
So there are winners and there are losers if you adjust that formula. And so it would be good for Janesville, but there may be some losers out there. And as sad as that is and unfortunate as that is, our position remains, we're just asking it for it to be fair and equitable and let the chips fall where they may.
Right.
But, when we've talked to legislators or the administration, they certainly get it, but they don't want to get into a problem set where we have winners and losers. So that's been an issue. We've certainly talked to our state legislators, and one of the things that was very fortunate for the city, we've carried that message, both the shared revenue issue and raising levy limits and even sales tax as some options. And the good news is back in 2017, when they were working the budget. They approved a $583,000 essentially special ERP payment, and what that does for us is that gives us over the course of 5 years an additional $583,000, and so that helps to make up that shortfall in shared revenue. But if you think about it, that only changes that by about $9 per resident in the city of Janesville. So it's, in the big scheme of things, Max was talking about $6.2 million.
Right.
$583,000 doesn't get you to that $6.2 million, but it gets you something. And what I think has really been neat about that is that we went to our legislators. They recognized we had an anomaly. They made an adjustment. It's just not the full adjustment that the city of Janesville is looking for. So, that's been really good to do, but we've got a long way to go.
So let's talk a little bit more about that $583,000 payment. What has been done in the past with that increased revenue from the state?
Yeah, so 2018 was the first year that we were able to utilize that additional $583,000, and like I said, it will be available to the city for a total of 5 years. What we were able to do with that, and I think I need to probably backtrack a little bit, and one of the things that when we were trying to convince our legislators and the administration that we had a shortfall, we always compared our police per capita, our fire per capita, our transit costs per capita. And so collectively as a leadership team, we said, that was the message we took to the legislators and the administration. They gave us some money. We probably ought to put our money where our mouth was, and that was apply it to police, fire, and transit. So that's really what we did. We were able, with that $583,000, able to hire 3 additional police officers, 3 additional firefighters, and much different than what is the trend in the current transit industry. It seems like we're always raising fares in the transit industry. We were able to last year, or actually in 2018, decrease the fare cost for our riders. And that's a group of people that are getting around by public transportation, not necessarily because they want to, but in a lot of cases because they have to. And so if we can make that burden or that cost burden a little bit less, I think that was a good thing for the community to do. And so as an example, our regular fare prior to 2018 was $1.75 a ride, and we were able to decrease it by 25 cents to $1.50 a ride. So that was a good news story. And then we had a little bit of additional funding that we put towards some essentially some reviews of some of our systems inside of the city of Janesville that frankly hopefully will have some positive either financial effect or some positive outcomes in how we conduct business in the city of Janesville. One specifically in the information technology office, and then another one in our personnel office. And then the last thing that we did is really something to help our citizenry. All of our ordinances are online, and they used to be online in a system that was a little bit not so user-friendly, if you will. And so we were able to transition our ordinances to a system called MuniCode, which is, run a little bit more simply, if you will, a little bit more intuitive, certainly searchable, and so we made that transition. And that then not only serves city staff and council members, but more importantly the public who are looking to look specific things up on the ordinances. And so I think we've used our money appropriately in 18, and we're programmed to do so again 19 and in the out years. But again, $583,000 is a small portion of that $6.2 million that Max was talking about, that really would be more appropriate.
So Max, municipalities in Wisconsin are not able to levy local sales taxes. Can you explain how changing the law to allow for local option sales tax would be a good thing for Janesville?
Certainly. So in Wisconsin, municipalities don't have many options for revenue sources. And when you look at revenue and finance in government, there's really 3 things you look at. There's either a tax on wealth, which is property taxes, tax on consumption, which would be a sales tax, for goods or services received, or a tax on income. And currently, if you look at that mix, ideally you want to have a little bit of both, or of all 3. And right now, the municipal revenue is really heavily geared towards taxing on wealth, which is property. And we recognize that the property taxes, although they're appreciated, that there's other people who use programs and services offered by the city of Janesville that aren't property owners. So one thing the city has been advocating for the past several years is really, let's look at a local option sales tax where a half cent would be remitted back to municipalities to help pay for some of those programs and services. And as I mentioned, being a tax on consumption, we could really have people who are using programs and services start paying for them. And, specifically, I think that has to do with, non-residents paying their fair share as well. Janesville is the largest community in south central Wisconsin, and we are a regional economic hub. So there are a lot of people who either work or shop in Janesville, and they drive on our roads. If they have a need for service, public safety will respond, and that comes at a cost. But those people also don't contribute to help pay for those costs currently. So what we advocate for is for a half cent sales tax, and we would estimate that would generate about $8.7 million in 2018.
That's also a lot of money. So on the other side of revenue is expenditures. So let's turn the discussion to how that money is spent. In 2019, how will the money collected by property taxes get distributed amongst the taxing jurisdictions?
Sure. So currently in Janesville, there are 5 taxing jurisdictions that levy taxes, and your property either has 4 of them, depending on whether or not you live in the Janesville or Milton School District. For the purposes of this illustration, I'll just talk about the Janesville School District. So there's 4 jurisdictions that levy taxes, and they will show up on your tax bill, and each of them have a different amount or proportion of that tax bill. So the city of Janesville does have the largest portion of that, so to pay for your general government, police and fire, parks and recreation, and library services, that's about 36% of your tax bill. And then next is the Janesville School District, who makes up about 32% of your tax bill, and that's the cost to educate our children. And then third is Rock County at about 27%, and those are more countywide services, so you're talking more about corrections as well as sheriff's office, as well as things like health and human services. And then lastly, 5% of all taxes collected in the city of Janesville go to Black Hawk Technical College for vocational and technical education.
It sounds like the city gets 36 cents of each dollar collected in property taxes. Mark, how does that get allocated to city services such as public safety, economic development, recreation, and other areas?
Yeah, sure. So, as Max explained, we're a portion of that overall tax bill. If you look at a chart with a dollar on it, you divide it up as to how that's going to be spread across the programs and the services that the city provides. The largest portion of that comes out of the police department. So for every dollar of taxes that come to the city, 28 cents goes towards the police department. And then 21 cents goes to fire, with 20 cents going to public works, 10 cents coming towards general government, which is basically all the things you find in City Hall, and then 9 cents to our library, 6 cents to parks and recreation, and then 2 cents goes towards community development, and then another 2 cents towards transit. And then we round out that last cent, kind of gets distributed across the city as a whole. So, lots of great things that the city is doing. A pretty reasonable distribution of that money towards the services that the city provides. I would point out, a lot of people say public safety is so important, and it is, and it's evidenced by where the city's dollar goes. So if you take that 28 cents going to police and that 21 cent going towards fire, you're at 49 cents out of every dollar, so almost half is going towards public safety. And that's important for the community to appreciate is that, they say that's important, and we acknowledge that by putting our money where their concerns are.
Let's talk about the general fund versus enterprise funds. Max, what's a quick explanation of the difference between the two, and what revenues go to the different funds?
So the general fund is the city's chief operating fund, and all municipalities are required to have a general fund, and it accounts for your general revenues, so your property taxes as well as your shared revenue, and then it pays for your citywide programs and services, things such as general government, public safety, public works, parks, recreation, as library services as well. So when I tend to think of the general fund, I tend to think of it as like my own personal checking account. But then the city also has what we call enterprise funds, which are to specifically account for revenues and expenses for business type activities, which a fee is charged for a service, and then that service is rendered. So the city has 4 enterprise funds, those being the water utility, wastewater utility, stormwater utility, and transit. So there is a very tangible service that each of them provide and a fee collected for that. So if I was thinking about in someone's personal life, that would be similar to if they had a business. You don't keep your business revenues and expenses in your personal checking account. You would have a separate bank account or a separate, LLC or corporation to account for that.
And there seems to be some misunderstanding when it comes to fees collected by the city. Can you clarify how fees are used in Janesville?
Sure. So the city charges fees for certain programs and services, and again, as I mentioned, ones that have very tangible outputs. So very tangible consumption of that program or service. So whether it's you're being admission to the pool or receiving a ride on transit or ambulance or water usage, we do charge a fee for that. And one of the reasons we do that is that, one, there are restrictions on the amount of revenue we can increase from property taxes due to state restrictions, but also the belief that if you're a consumer or direct consumer of a program or service, that you should be paying for that. And that's what a fee is. It really allows the city to help recuperate the cost of providing that program or service.
Mark, did we see any significant changes to the 2019 budget?
Yeah, I mean, I guess in general terms, no. As I said, it was kind of a maintenance budget,
Right.
but we were able to put some money towards some programs that we had to decrease in 2018. So we were able to put some money back towards our snow removal budget and to put some money into our attorney litigation fees and consultant fees for those outside attorneys. Most importantly was an internal personnel adjustment for the city of Janesville, and currently we have 5 people in our information technology office, and we've got over 555 employees, and we have just numerous computers and digital systems and technology, and frankly they have a hard time keeping up. And one of the areas where the technology is expanding faster than we're able to keep up with is on that public safety side. And so we asked the council to support the funding of an information technology support specialist dedicated to our public safety program, so police and fire. And so that will help us manage all the care and feeding that you have to do on a day-to-day basis to keep our police officers on the street, to keep our firefighters responding to calls, et cetera, et cetera. And so that was really the significant change from a city perspective. But again, it's to make sure that our programs and services and our departments and divisions are able to do what they need to do.
As part of the budget process, the city plans its capital projects for the following year. How can you define a capital project, and how are those projects funded, Max?
Sure. In simplest terms, a capital project is really one that helps maintain or improve a city asset. And it's often, we tend to think of it as infrastructure or capital equipment. But when we think of a capital project, it generally meets a few criteria. One, it's either new construction, expansion, renovation, or replacement of an existing city facility, or it's a major maintenance or rehabilitation for existing facilities with an economic life of about 10 years, or it's the purchase of a major capital item such as equipment with a useful life of 3 years. So it's more of your larger purchases that have longer term lives. And the way we plan for this is the city develops each year a 5-year capital improvement plan. So we look at the next year plus the next 4 years afterwards and really plan out what are the city's capital needs over that 5-year period by department as well as function, and then more importantly, how is the city going to be able to fund those those projects over that 5-year period? And we really look at things like how much general obligation debt can the city borrow to be fiscally conservative and maintain a good credit rating with S&P. So we look at factors like that as well. We also receive a large portion of the funding for capital projects, or the second largest portion comes from state or federal grants. So we do also look at that as well when we have grant opportunities to help offset some of those borrowing costs. And then thirdly, capital projects are paid with user fees as well.
Mark, can you discuss any big capital projects planned for 2019?
Yeah, we've got a big capital program again in 2019, as we seem to have just about every year. But I would focus it first of all kind of in the downtown, and specifically in our town square. So anybody who's been in the downtown has seen recently a lot of activity. One of the projects that's currently ongoing is the demolition of the Milwaukee Street Bridge. That bridge is over 100 years old, was classified as needing to come down, and so our project really from 18 and into 19 is the removal of the Milwaukee Street Bridge, and then the rebuilding and reconstruction of the Milwaukee Street Bridge. So anybody who's been down there recently will notice that the bridge is in the process of coming down. We expect it to be down by the end of the year, and then as we move into January, hopefully January to March, we'll see the piers start to come out and the pylons coming out of the river, and then in the late spring they'll be able to put the road surface and the bridge itself in. And so that's our big main project that the city's focused on in the downtown. And then there's really a privately funded but publicly managed project going on, and that's the Blaine Gilbertson Family Heritage Bridge. And this is a pedestrian bridge that's going to be built over the course of the summer here in downtown Janesville. It's going to connect the west side of the town square to the east side of the town square, and we are really looking forward to seeing that new addition to our kind of downtown city landscape. But it's not only is it going to be able to allow people to walk back and forth easily between the east and the west side of the river, but it's truly going to be an iconic art piece in the center of our downtown, in the heart of the downtown. So those are really the two big downtown projects going on this summer. The other thing that the city has been doing very, very actively since, I guess 2015 and beyond is we've increased our road program. So the community, Max and I were out in 2014 as we developed the strategic plan. The message we were hearing loud and clear from members of the public was, we want our roads fixed. Frankly, a lot of the city roads were in some bad shape. And, so we did a little bit of analysis as a city and said, we have 330 miles of roadway in the city that the city's responsible for managing. There are other roads that are managed by the county, the state, or the federal government, but 330 that the city is responsible for. And we know that a road on average will last about 25 years, so we know that if we want to keep pace with that replacement cycle every 25 years or so, we know we need to do 12 miles of road per year. Well, in 2014, we were only doing 6 miles of road per year, so we weren't even coming close to hitting our target. And so, again, went to the council, kind of laid out the problem set, and got the council to agree to let's increase the road program. In fact, let's double it, to 12 miles a year. And so in 2015, we bumped it up to 6.5. In 2016, we were at 12 miles. And then in 2017, we were at 14 miles. And so huge improvement over the last couple of years. And the 14 miles that we did in 2017 was because of a couple city-run programs on city roads, but state-funded through some special programming. And so that was a good news story. And then this past year, we just finished up an additional 12 miles. And that's the plan, to keep that going. But, as a program, I think we're looking at about $6 million per year for those 12 miles. And, the question that the community is going to have to wrestle with here in the coming years is, can we sustain that? With all the other things that we want to do, can we sustain that? And so that'll be a discussion here, hopefully at some point early spring or late spring. So we'll see where that one goes. I would also tell you that from a capital project, one of the things that's significant in our community this year in particular is that we've received notification that we're receiving funding from the state and federal authorities to replace some of our buses. And we've talked about transit, and transit is largely funded by state and federal dollars. The city provides about $1 million in operating subsidy out of the general fund. But when you think about, that's just for operations. When you think about from a capital plan, you know, we've got to replace buses. And right now, we have 17 buses in our fleet. All of those buses have hit the threshold for it's time to replace them. And the thresholds are either 500,000 miles or 12 years in service. And all 17 of our buses have surpassed either one of those milestones, or in some cases, both. And so the good news is that you know, we've got buses you know, scheduled to replace. We've received notification that we've got federal funding to replace 14 of those 17 buses in the next couple of years. And so in 2019, we're going to borrow about $325,000 to put towards our portion of those buses. Again, a bus, 80% is covered by the federal or state, and 20% is covered by us. 2020, another $330,000, and in 2021, $200,000. And so, you know, keeping that program going, because it is critical for our citizenry to be able to get around town. And a couple other quick ones as far as capital items. You know, our fire department, they have 6 ambulances, 4 that are mainline, and then 2 that are in reserve. And so we've got 1 that we need to replace in 2019, so there's funding authorized to do that. And then from a public safety perspective, if you've been to City Hall here recently, you'll notice that the big concrete deck at the main entrance to City Hall has some concrete patches on that. And what we've discovered is that the concrete deck is failing, and that's just from 50 years worth of snow, ice, water, etc., you know, kind of permeating through it. And so we've got some challenges on the underside that need to get replaced. And so from a public safety perspective, that'll be one of our projects in 2019. And then lastly, this one's so important for our police officers, and that is all of our police officers that are in the field will always wear a body camera. And that's to protect them, but also to protect the public. And we're just at that point in time where those body cameras that they currently wear need to be replaced. And so that's just an example of, you know, some of the things that we're doing in 2019. But again, you know, they're all about keeping the public safe. They're all about serving the community, and then making sure that, you know, our people have the right equipment.
Something that's important to Janesville residents is the value of the services that they receive from the city in exchange for what they provide in funding. Max, how do we measure the cost of the city's programs and services relative to other cities in Wisconsin?
First, I'd like to say the city of Janesville and its employees really do pride itself on providing quality programs and services at a great value, and that's one thing that I hope our residents recognize. And as such, you know, city staff, we really do monitor how our programs and service expenses compare to what you would find in other peer communities across the state of Wisconsin. So what we've developed is what we call our peer community financial analysis, and essentially that looks at specific program and service costs per capita between us and our 14 peer communities. And I'm happy to report, so looking at 2016 data, the city of Janesville's per capita spending on general government, street maintenance, law enforcement services all ranked within the bottom 3 of our 15 peers. And then when we combine these basic services together, these are the foundational services of any community, whether it's providing general services, good roads, as well as a safe community. When you combine those 3 together, the city spends less per capita than all 14 of those peer communities. So another good indicator that the residents are getting a good value for their dollar here in Janesville. But we also look at how much spending per capita Janesville does on all programs and services, whether it's water, wastewater, stormwater, you know, some of those utility or fee-based programs or services as well. And Janesville ranks as the 6th lowest amongst our peers, so in a very strong position again. So I would encourage residents to check out the peer community financial analysis on the city website.
Mark, if members of the public want to explore the budget further and learn more, where can they find that information?
Yeah, so the best site is certainly our website, to get that information. And I would tell you, that the city, we want to be transparent, certainly. We want to be accountable. So, if you've got questions, you see something online and it doesn't make sense, give us a call, send us an email, ask the question. We're certainly going to make sure we're accessible, and that is, when someone calls the city manager's office, if I'm not in the office, they're going to take a message and I'll call you back. Or if I'm in the office, happily take the call. And so we want to make sure that we're accessible, and then we want to be responsive, and that is, if people call or make inquiries or are looking for information, our standard is that we're going to respond within 48 hours. And sometimes we may not be able to get to it within 48 hours, but my expectation of the staff is to tell folks, hey, look, inside that 48-hour window, hey, look, I can't get to that until the end of the week, but I'll follow up with you by Friday, for example.
Right.
And so, transparency, accountability, accessibility, and responsiveness is really kind of what's driving the city. I would tell you that, we always want to make sure that we post real-time data and make sure that it's accessible to people. And so our budget is one of the things that's out there online so that people can access that. So if they go to our city website, www.ci.janesville.wi.us/2019 budget, it'll take you to the budget document. God bless you if you want to read that entire document, but if you want to look at the numbers and understand, where money is being spent, you can certainly do that. Probably a little easier way to access budget information is to go to a website or web pages and system that Max frankly set up is Open Budget, Open Expenditures, and then Park Place Performs. So Open Budget, allows the citizen to go in and look at budget data from 2008 to present and compare. And if you want to compare, how much we spent on animal control in 2008 and how we've changed that over the years to 2018 or into 19, you can do that. If you want to look at snow plowing, same thing. Open expenditures, if you want to see, where the money's going, you can certainly track that. And then really kind of the coup de grace, if you will, of transparency is not only providing that information, but then measuring ourselves. And so, again, Max developed a program called Park Place Performs. If you go online, you can access that. And what that will show is by the 9 strategic goals that we have in the community, what we're using as far as metrics in the city of Janesville, to track progress, not only outputs, but outcomes. What's the goodness of what we're doing, or maybe it tells us that we're not measuring up to what our own goals are, and so what do we need to do to fix that? But 3 great resources out there that are user friendly, they're easy to get to, and frankly they're intuitive to work through. It's not you don't have to have an IT degree to figure out how to use them and to access them. And so I would encourage folks to do that. But again, Open Budget, Open Expenditures, or Park Place Performs, certainly something that every citizen in Janesville should recognize and at least go visit at some point in time.
Well, we're just about out of time. Do either of you have any closing thoughts for our viewers at home?
Yeah, I certainly do. And so I would tell you that, I think it's important for our residents and our businesses to get involved with lobbying our legislators. We talked a lot about some of the fiscal challenges that the city of Janesville is currently, operating very effectively, but we think we could do better, we could do more if shared revenue got fixed, if levy limits got adjusted, and if we were given the opportunity to employ a local sales tax, for example. So I encourage the community to get out and lobby the legislators. So when you see Representatives Kolste or Loudenbeck or Senators Noss or Ringhand, talk to them about, some of these concerns. And so, we continue to say fair is fair. We just want to make sure we're being treated fair. Being treated unfair as we currently are, I think we would all agree that's not right. And our citizens, how long do our citizens have to essentially take the short end of the stick in terms of shared revenue? Because that formula was frozen in 2001, and so for almost 18 years now, we've been living under a formula that was based upon Janesville in 2001. Well, we're a much different community in 2018 into 19 than we were in 2001. So let's get that thing fixed. And then, as I said with the levy limits piece, a lot of good hard work is going into place with bringing jobs and value and growth to Janesville and to the state of Wisconsin. And so why are we being penalized for all that good hard work when levy limits get consumed by inflation each and every year?
Yep.
And so, this is all about moving the community forward. We want to see progress, and we want to see progress so that our children, all have a better place to live, to grow, to work, and to raise their own families. And so, but we need to start that now. And so I would encourage folks to engage the legislators. And if you're curious, as the community is curious about what our legislative agenda is and to learn more, they can certainly go to our legislative update page. So again, our City of Janesville website, www.ci.janesville.wi.us/legislative. And you can look at our federal legislative agenda. You can also check out our state legislative agenda. And on that page is all the contact information for both our federal and state legislators. So I encourage folks to get involved, because me telling them, only gets them so far. If a bunch of residents from the city of Janesville let them know that this is a concern, I think we'd have a better success rate.
Yep. Max, anything from you?
I would just encourage residents, if you have any questions regarding the city's finances, feel free to contact me. One thing I like to do is really sit down and educate people as to, what revenues the city receives and, how the city spends its money.
Yeah, good point.
Very good. Well, like Max just said, if you do have any more questions for Mark or Max, feel free to give them a call or send them an email. You'll find that contact information on the screen. Thank you to City Manager Mark Freitag and Finance Director Max Gagin for joining me today and providing our viewers with information about the city's 2019 budget and other finance and legislative issues. And thank you, viewers at home, for tuning in. Be sure to join us next month for February's episode of Park Place Views. In addition to tuning into this program on a monthly basis, stay connected to the City of Janesville by following us on Facebook or Twitter. You can also sign up to receive emails with our press releases and other important information. And you can subscribe to get emergency alerts from the Janesville Police Department on Nixle. For Park Place Views and the City of Janesville, I'm your host, Molly Nolte. Thanks for tuning in, and we'll see you next month.